Look at this line, a perfectly straight border, drawn through 3,000 miles of nothing but sand, rock, and scorching emptiness. No river marks it, no mountain range defines it, no cultural boundary separates the people on either side. And yet, this imaginary line, invisible to anyone standing in the desert, has sparked wars, fueled terrorism, enabled modern slavery, and created what experts now call the world's most dangerous border. But here's the real question. How did a line drawn by Europeans who never set foot in this desert become the epicenter of 21st century chaos? The puzzle to understand this, we need to go back to 1884, Berlin, Germany. A conference room filled with European diplomats, carved mahogany tables, and maps of a continent most of them had never visited. The Berlin Conference. 14 nations gathered to divide Africa like a birthday cake. But here's the insane part. Not a single African leader was invited to decide the fate of their own continent. France wanted the Sahara. Britain wanted everything else. Belgium, Germany, Italy, Spain. Everyone wanted their piece. And they drew borders with one tool, a ruler. Literally, they used rulers and pencils on maps in Paris and London, drawing straight lines through territories they called terra nullius, nobody's land. Never mind the millions of people who actually lived there. For thousands of years, the Sahara belonged to nomadic peoples. The Tuareg, the Tubu, the Moors. These weren't empty deserts, they were highways, trade routes connecting sub-Saharan Africa to the Mediterranean. Ancient cities like Timbuktu were centers of wealth and knowledge. But to the Europeans, this was just blank space on a map, an inconvenient obstacle between their coastal colonies and the resources they craved inland. So they drew their lines. And these lines had nothing to do with reality. The Tuareg were split across 5 countries, the Tubu across 3. Families woke up one morning as Nigerians, the next as citizens of Chad. Languages, cultures, ancient trading routes, all sliced apart by borders that existed only on European maps. And the problem started immediately. The journey. When African independence came in the 1960s, these colonial borders became international borders. And that's when the wars began. Let's start with Western Sahara, the world's last colony. When Spain abandoned it in 1975, Morocco and Mauritania immediately invaded, claiming historical rights. But the indigenous Sahrawi people had other ideas. They formed the Polisario Front and fought back. Morocco responded by building something absolutely insane, a 1,700-mile wall, the longest operational military barrier in the world. Longer than the Great Wall of China's main tourist sections. It's fortified with landmines, sensors, and 100,000 Moroccan troops. On one side, Moroccan-controlled territory. On the other, a no-man's land that Morocco calls the buffer zone and the Polisario calls liberated territory. And between them, over 7 million landmines. 50 years later, this conflict is still unresolved. And it's created something unexpected, a training ground. Because when you create ungoverned spaces in the desert, something fills the void. Welcome to the Sahel, the band of semi-arid land just south of the Sahara. This is where Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Chad meet. And over the last 20 years, it's become the global epicenter of jihadist violence. ISIS, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, Boko Haram. These groups thrive here because the borders don't work. A government can control a capital city 500 miles away, but out here in the desert, there is no government. Look at northern Mali. It's larger than France. The population, maybe 1 million people scattered across an area with almost no roads, no infrastructure, no cell service. The Malian army can't patrol this. No one can. So these groups move freely. They cross from Mali to Niger to Burkina Faso, like you'd cross from your living room to your kitchen. Because to them, these borders are fiction. And then there's Libya. When Gaddafi fell in 2011, his weapons didn't disappear. They flooded south into the Sahara. Anti-aircraft missiles, rocket launchers, millions of rounds of ammunition. Suddenly, every militia, every insurgent group, every trafficking network in the Sahara was armed to the teeth. And they used those weapons to take control of the most valuable thing in the desert, the roads. Because here's what most people don't understand. The Sahara isn't empty. It's one of the busiest highways in the world. The same routes that once carried gold and salt now carry people, drugs, and weapons. And the groups that control these routes, they're making millions. The implications. Let's talk about what's actually happening in the Sahara right now, because this isn't ancient history. This is today's crisis. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people attempt to cross the Sahara. They're fleeing war, poverty, climate change in sub-Saharan Africa, and they're trying to reach Europe. The journey is 100 to 200 miles of pure hell. Temperatures reach 120 degrees Fahrenheit. There are no gas stations, no hospitals, no rescue services. You pay a smuggler everything you have. You climb into the back of a pickup truck with 30 other people and you pray. The International Organization for Migration estimates that twice as many migrants die in the Sahara as die crossing the Mediterranean. But no one sees these deaths. No cameras, no rescue boats, just bones in the sand. And the smuggling networks running this? They're making an estimated $150–300 million per year. It's become an industry, but migration is only part of the story. Because underneath this worthless desert, unimaginable wealth. Niger produces 5% of the world's uranium, much of it powering French nuclear reactors. Libya has Africa's largest oil reserves. Algeria is Europe's third largest gas supplier. Chad, Mauritania, they're all sitting on billions in untapped resources. And everyone wants a piece. France has military bases throughout the Sahel. The US has drone bases. China is building infrastructure. Russia's Wagner Group is providing security in Mali and Libya. This isn't a forgotten desert. This is a chessboard where global powers are competing for influence, and the borders that Europe drew 140 years ago are completely irrelevant to the game being played, which brings us to the final crisis. The borders themselves are collapsing. Since 2020, there have been 8 successful military coups in the Sahel. Mali twice, Burkina Faso twice, Niger, Chad, Guinea, Sudan. These aren't accidents, they're symptoms. These governments can't control their territory. They can't provide security. They can't deliver services. So the military takes over, promising stability. But they can't control the desert either. Meanwhile, insurgent groups are expanding. They're not just attacking, they're governing, providing justice, collecting taxes, running courts. In some areas, they're more legitimate than the government. And the borders drawn in Berlin? They're completely meaningless now. So why should you care about lines in the sand 4,000 miles away? Because what happens in the Sahara doesn't stay in the Sahara. The migration crisis in Europe, it flows through here. The terrorism that struck Paris, Nice, Manchester, trained here. The uranium powering your lights, mined here. The instability that could create the next Afghanistan, it's brewing here. The Sahara isn't empty. It's not irrelevant. It's one of the most important regions on Earth. Conclusion. That straight line we started with? It was drawn by men who thought the desert was empty, who thought they could organize Africa like a filing cabinet, neat, clean, permanent. But the desert was never empty, and borders drawn on maps in European capitals were never going to control what happens in 3.6 million square miles of sand. The Sahara has always been a crossroads. For trade, for culture, for power. The only thing that's changed is that now, the people who live there are being forced to navigate borders that were designed to control them, not serve them. And until the world recognizes that these borders are part of the problem, not the solution, the Sahara will remain the world's most dangerous border, because you can draw all the lines you want on a map. But the desert doesn't care about lines. If you want to understand more about how colonial borders still shape our world, check out our video on the Scramble for Africa and let me know in the comments. Do you think these borders can ever work? Or is it time to redraw the map? Thanks for watching.